On March 22, 2007, at 11:14 in the morning, a 51-year-old farmer named Russell Breckenridge walked into Talbot Equipment, a Massey Ferguson dealership in Mount Pleasant, Iowa, carrying a transmission control module that had failed after 410 hours of operation. The part was still under warranty. The service manager looked at it for less than 3 minutes, turned it over twice, and said the damage was caused by voltage irregularities. Electrical system misuse, not covered. Russell had brought his service records. Battery replaced 6 months earlier. Alternator tested and confirmed operational at the 200-hour service. Electrical system inspected by a certified technician in February. All clean. The service manager didn't look at the records. He said the decision was final. Russell set the module on the counter, nodded once, and walked out. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten to call Massey Ferguson corporate or take his business elsewhere. He just left. 4 days later, the dealer called him back. They said they'd reconsidered. They'd split the cost with him 60-40, a compromise. Russell said no. He paid the full $3,780 out of pocket, installed the new module himself with help from a neighbor, and finished his spring fieldwork 3 weeks late. By the end of that summer, he'd lost his lease on 320 acres. The landlord gave it to a younger farmer who'd gotten his planting done on schedule. Russell never mentioned it to anyone outside his family. But 21 other farmers had been in that dealership over those 4 days. They'd seen the module on the counter. They'd heard the service manager's tone. They'd watched Russell walk out alone. And they started paying attention. If you've been farming long enough to remember when a dealership stood behind the red iron they sold, when a warranty meant something more than fine print, and when a man's maintenance records carried weight in a service bay, then you know this story isn't about one transmission module. It's about what happens when trust breaks quietly and no one notices until the damage is permanent. We're telling these stories because they matter, because the decisions made in dealership offices echo across counties, because rural communities are built on memory, and memory is built on whether or not you honored your word. If that's the kind of farming you remember, or the kind you're trying to protect, consider subscribing. These stories take time to research and tell properly. Your support helps us keep them accurate, respectful, and rooted in what actually happened. Now, back to March 2007. Russell Breckenridge had been farming 740 acres in Henry County, Iowa since 1981. Corn and soybeans, rotated properly. He owned 420 of those acres outright, paid off by 2001. The other 320 he leased from a man named Vernon Stahl, who'd inherited the land from his uncle. Russell ran a disciplined operation. One full-time hired man, seasonal help during planting and harvest. His wife managed the books and handled grain marketing. His daughter had left for nursing school in Des Moines. His son was finishing ag business at Iowa State. Russell had bought Massey Ferguson since 1985, not out of brand loyalty, but out of respect for the dealer. Talbot Equipment was 14 miles from his farm. When something broke, he could get parts same day. When he needed service, they came out without charging travel time. He wasn't a high-volume customer. He bought used when he could. He traded up only when something wore out completely. But he paid his invoices within 15 days, never asked for payment extensions, and never brought equipment back with problems he'd caused himself. In 2005, he'd traded a worn-out Massey Ferguson 3680 for a newer 6480 model with a loader, not new, but newer. He'd financed $81,000 over 6 years at 7.2%. The payments were manageable. The tractor ran well for the first season. In spring 2006, he bought a Massey Ferguson 8270 tractor, again used, with 1,890 hours on it. He needed the horsepower for a new 16-row planter setup and deeper tillage work. The tractor cost $94,500. He paid half down and financed the rest. That tractor was the one with the transmission control module. It failed in March 2007, just as he was finishing pre-plant fertilizer application, 410 hours after he'd bought it. The service records were clear. Russell changed engine oil every 100 hours. He used Massey Ferguson-approved fluids. He replaced filters on schedule. He kept every receipt in a 3-ring binder. In February 2007, 4 weeks before the failure, he'd had the electrical system inspected by a mobile technician who specialized in Massey Ferguson electronics. The diagnostic report came back clean. No voltage spikes, no grounding issues, alternator output within spec. The module failed anyway. It wasn't catastrophic. The tractor didn't stop running. The transmission just stopped shifting properly. It would move in third gear, but wouldn't shift up or down. The CVT controls were unresponsive. The tractor could still move, but it couldn't do field work efficiently. Russell had it towed to Talbot Equipment on March 20th. 2 days later, he went in to check on it. That's when the service manager, a man named Greg Underhill, who'd been with the dealership for 9 years, told him the damage was from voltage irregularities in the electrical system. Russell asked what kind of irregularities. Greg said it didn't matter. The warranty didn't cover electrical misuse. Russell showed him the service records. Greg didn't look at them. Russell showed him the diagnostic report from 4 weeks earlier. Greg glanced at it and said the voltage spike must have happened after that. Russell asked if they'd tested the tractor's electrical system. Greg said they didn't need to. Russell asked to speak to the owner. Greg said the owner agreed with the decision. So Russell paid for the new module, installed it himself in his shop with help from a neighbor who understood Massey Ferguson electronics, and got back to work. By then, it was April 12th. Most of his neighbors had finished fertilizer application by April 5th. The landlord who leased him the 320 acres was named Vernon Stahl. He was 68 years old. He'd been renting that ground to Russell since 1989. He called him on July 9th. He said his grandson had approached him about leasing the land. The grandson farmed 2,100 acres and was looking to expand. He'd offered Vernon $24 more per acre than Russell was paying. Vernon liked Russell. He trusted him. But he was planning to retire fully, and $7,680 a year was significant income. He said if Russell could match the offer, the land was his. Russell couldn't. He'd just paid $3,780 out of pocket for a repair that should have been covered. His margins were already tight. An extra $7,680 would put him in the red. He told Vernon he understood and that he hoped his grandson did well with the ground. Vernon said he was sorry. The lease ended that fall. Russell didn't talk about it. Not to his wife, not to his hired man, not to the neighbors who asked why he wasn't planting the stall ground in spring 2008. He just adjusted. He scaled back. He sold the 16-row planter he'd bought the 8270 to pull. He reduced his seed and fertilizer orders. He kept farming the 420 acres he owned, and he made it work. But other people had been paying attention. Wayne Cordell farmed 580 acres 18 miles west of Russell. He'd been buying from Talbot Equipment since 1993. He had a Massey Ferguson 8160 and a 9690 combine. He'd been in the dealership on March 21st, the day after Russell's tractor came in. He'd seen it in the service bay. He'd asked the parts counter guy what was wrong with it. The parts guy said it was a transmission control failure, probably warranty. The next week, Wayne was back picking up hydraulic hose fittings. He asked if Russell's tractor was fixed yet. The parts guy said it was done, but the warranty hadn't covered it. Wayne didn't say anything, but he remembered. In June 2007, Wayne's combine threw a bearing in the feeder house during wheat harvest. It wasn't a cheap fix, close to $4,200 in parts and labor. The combine had 1,140 hours on it, still under warranty. Wayne called Talbot and told them what happened. They sent a tech out the next day. The tech looked at it, made some notes, and said he'd file the claim. 3 days later, Greg Underhill called Wayne and said the bearing failure was caused by excessive foreign material in the crop. Not covered. Wayne asked how they determined that. Greg said the tech had documented it. Wayne asked to see the documentation. Greg said it was internal. Wayne had been running Massey Ferguson equipment for 14 years. He knew how to set his feeder house properly. He'd been combining wheat on the same ground for a decade. He didn't argue with Greg. He paid the $4,200, but he started asking around. By September 2007, Wayne had talked to 8 other farmers in the area. 4 of them had recent warranty denials from Talbot Equipment. One was a hydraulic pump failure on an 8690 denied because of alleged contaminated fluid, though the farmer had documented oil analysis reports. Another was a PTO clutch failure on a 6480, denied because of improper engagement, though the farmer had been operating PTOs for 35 years. A third was a combined rotor bearing on a 9790, denied because of overloading, though the only thing in that field had been soybeans. A fourth was an engine injector failure on an 8280, denied because of fuel quality issues, though the farmer bought fuel from the same co-op everyone else used. None of the denials had been explained in technical detail. None of the farmers had been given documentation they could review. None of them had been offered a compromise before the dealer made the final call. They'd all just paid. Wayne started keeping a list. In February 2008, a farmer named Leonard Staub bought a used Massey Ferguson 8690 from Talbot Equipment. It had 1,620 hours on it. Leonard paid $118,000. The dealership included a 120-day powertrain warranty. In April, during spring planting, the tractor's rear differential started making noise, a grinding sound that got worse under load. Leonard brought it back to Talbot on April 24th. Greg Underhill looked at it and said the damage was from running the tractor in the wrong gear range for the load. Leonard asked what that meant. Greg said he'd been operating it outside the recommended RPM range. Leonard said he'd been using it the same way he'd used every tractor for 42 years, watching the tachometer, listening to the engine, shifting when it made sense. Greg said that wasn't good enough anymore. Modern Massey Fergusons required more precision. Leonard asked if they could prove he'd operated it incorrectly. Greg said the damage itself was proof. The repair cost $9,100. Leonard paid it. Then he called Wayne Cordell. By May 2008, Wayne had a list of 16 farmers who'd had warranty claims denied by Talbot Equipment in the past 16 months. The reasons varied: voltage irregularities, contaminated fluid, improper operation, foreign material, fuel quality, excessive load, improper engagement, lack of maintenance. But the pattern was the same. The dealership would inspect the failure, declare it customer-caused, and refuse to file a warranty claim with Massey Ferguson Corporate. No appeals process, no second opinions, no documentation provided to the customer. The farmers paid or they didn't get their equipment back. Most of them paid. Wayne started making calls, not to organize anything, not to plan a protest, just to see if anyone else was frustrated. Everyone was, but no one knew what to do about it. Talbot Equipment was the only Massey Ferguson dealer within 52 miles. The next closest was in Burlington, 47 miles southeast. That dealer was smaller, older, and didn't stock as many parts. If you farmed Massey Ferguson equipment in Henry County, you dealt with Talbot or you switched brands. In August 2008, a farmer named Douglas Reinhard traded in his Massey Ferguson 9690 combine at Talbot Equipment. He'd owned it since 2003. It had 2,040 hours on it, and it ran fine. He bought a John Deere combine from a dealer in Washington. When people asked him why, he said he wanted to try something different. But Wayne Cordell knew Douglas had been one of the 16 on the list. In October, another farmer, Stanley Voss, traded his Massey Ferguson 8270 for a Case IH tractor. He'd been farming Massey Ferguson since 1989. He didn't explain it to anyone. In November, a third farmer made the switch. Wayne started to realize the problem wasn't going to fix itself by complaining. It was going to fix itself by leaving. In December 2008, Wayne Cordell drove to Burlington to meet with the Massey Ferguson dealer there, a place called Prairie Red Equipment. It was smaller than Talbot, 4 service bays instead of 7, fewer tractors on the lot. But the service manager, a man named Frank Colson, had been there since 1984. Wayne asked him if he'd heard anything about Talbot Equipment. Frank said he'd heard some things. Wayne asked if Prairie Red would be willing to take on more customers from Henry County, even though it was outside their usual territory. Frank said they'd take anyone who wanted honest service. Wayne asked what their warranty process looked like. Frank said they filed every legitimate claim. If Massey Ferguson denied it, they'd appeal. If the appeal failed, they'd work with the customer on cost sharing. But they didn't deny claims themselves just to avoid paperwork. Wayne thanked him and drove home. Over the next 4 weeks, he made 19 phone calls. The plan wasn't dramatic. No boycott, no petition, no confrontation. Just a quiet agreement among farmers who were tired of being told their maintenance was inadequate and their operation was improper. They would finish the 2008 season with their current equipment. Then, over the winter and into spring 2009, they would trade at auction or through private sale, not back to Talbot, but to other dealers or directly to buyers outside the area. They would buy their next machines from Prairie Red Equipment in Burlington or from dealers even farther out. They wouldn't make a scene. They wouldn't publicly criticize Talbot. They would just stop doing business there. Wayne's list had grown to 22 farmers by January 2009. Not all of them agreed to switch. Some couldn't afford to trade yet. Some didn't want to drive 47 miles for parts and service, but 17 of them committed. By April 2009, 7 of them had already made the move. Greg Underhill noticed in May. He asked the sales manager why tractor trade-ins were down. The sales manager said it was just the economy. Commodity prices had dropped. Credit was tight. Greg said it wasn't the economy, it was specific. The farmers who were missing were all mid-sized operations, all repeat customers, all people who'd bought from Talbot for years. The sales manager said maybe they were holding equipment longer. Greg didn't think so. In June, he saw Leonard Staub driving a different tractor, not the Massey Ferguson 8690 he'd bought from Talbot the year before, a newer Case IH model, but not one Talbot had sold. Greg asked the parts guy if Leonard had been in recently. The parts guy said no, not since the differential repair. Greg started checking service records. Wayne Cordell hadn't been in since November 2008. Douglas Reinhardt hadn't been in since August. Stanley Voss, nothing since September. By July 2009, Greg had identified 13 customers who'd stopped coming in entirely. He mentioned it to the owner, a man named Dale Talbot, whose father had started Talbot Equipment in 1971. Dale said it was probably the recession. Farm economy was contracting. People were consolidating. Greg said it didn't feel like the recession. Dale told him not to worry about it. By November 2009, Talbot Equipment service revenue was down 26% compared to the previous year. Parts sales were down 21%. New equipment sales were flat, but used trade-ins had dropped by 38%. Dale Talbot called a staff meeting and asked what was going on. Greg Underhill said he thought they were losing customers to Prairie Red Equipment. Dale asked why. Greg didn't have a good answer. The parts manager said he'd heard complaints about warranty denials, but nothing specific. Dale said every dealership deals with warranty issues. That's part of the business. Greg asked if they should reach out to some of the customers who'd stopped coming in. Dale said if they wanted to leave, let them leave. There were always other customers. The meeting ended. In March 2010, Wayne Cordell bought a new Massey Ferguson 8680 from Prairie Red Equipment. It cost $164,000. He financed it over 7 years. It was the most expensive piece of equipment he'd ever bought. Frank Colson, the service manager at Prairie Red, told him if he had any issues, anything at all, to call immediately. They'd send a tech out or Wayne could bring it in. Either way, they'd handle it. Wayne said he appreciated that. In May, the tractor's GPS display stopped showing field boundaries. Not a mechanical failure, just a software update issue. Wayne called Prairie Red. They had a tech at his farm the next afternoon. The tech updated the software, calibrated the system, and had it working by 5 p.m., no charge. Wayne mentioned it to 4 other farmers that week. By June, 3 of them had switched to Prairie Red as well. Russell Breckenridge never switched. He kept his Massey Ferguson 8270, the one with the transmission control module he'd paid for out of pocket. He kept his 6480 with the loader. He kept buying parts from Talbot Equipment, though he did his own repairs whenever possible. He didn't join Wayne Cordell's group. He didn't make phone calls. He didn't coordinate with anyone. He just kept farming his 420 acres. In 2009, his soybean yield was below county average. Too much rain in July and his field drainage wasn't sufficient to handle it. In 2010, fertilizer prices spiked and his input costs ate most of his margin. In 2011, his hired man quit to take a factory job in Burlington. Better pay, health insurance, weekends off. Russell didn't replace him. He started running the whole operation himself. His wife asked if he was managing all right. He said he was fine. In 2012, he was treated for high blood pressure and stress-related exhaustion. The doctor told him to slow down. He said he'd think about it. He didn't. By 2010, Talbot Equipment had lost 38 regular customers. Not all of them had switched to Prairie Red. Some had gone to other dealers in surrounding counties. Some had switched brands entirely. A few had quit farming. But the pattern was clear. Dale Talbot hired a consultant to analyze the dealership's customer retention. The consultant interviewed 14 former customers. 9 of them mentioned warranty issues. 6 of them specifically mentioned Greg Underhill. The consultant's report recommended revising the warranty claim process, improving customer communication, and offering cost sharing on disputed repairs. Dale read the report and filed it. He didn't change anything. In 2011, Talbot Equipment service revenue was down 43% from 2007. In 2012, Massey Ferguson Corporate sent a territory rep to review the dealership's performance. The rep noted declining sales, poor customer retention, and multiple complaints filed directly with corporate bypass channels. In 2013, Massey Ferguson restructured Talbot's franchise agreement, reducing their territory and placing them on probationary status. In 2014, Dale Talbot sold the dealership to a regional equipment group. The new owners cleaned house. Greg Underhill was let go in the first month. The building was rebranded. The service policies were rewritten, but the damage was already done. Wayne Cordell kept a copy of his list, the one with 22 names on it. By 2014, 17 of those farmers were buying from Prairie Red Equipment or other dealers. 4 had retired. 1 was still farming, but barely. That one was Russell Breckenridge. Wayne saw him at the grain elevator in December 2014. Russell looked older than 58, thinner, worn. Wayne asked how he was managing. Russell said he was managing fine. Wayne asked if he'd heard Talbot had been sold. Russell said he had. Wayne asked where he was getting parts now. Russell said he still went to Talbot when he needed something. Wayne said Prairie Red was a good outfit. Honest people. Russell nodded. Wayne didn't mention the list. He didn't mention the phone calls or the quiet coordination or the 17 farmers who'd made the switch together. He just said if Russell ever needed anything to let him know. Russell thanked him and walked out. In 2016, Russell Breckenridge sold 140 acres to a neighbor for $8,100 an acre. He used the money to pay off the remaining debt on the 8270 and the 6480. He kept farming 280 acres, all he could handle alone. In 2018, he had a health scare, chest pains that sent him to the hospital for 2 days. The doctor said his heart was fine, but his stress levels were dangerous. His son asked if he wanted to retire. Russell said not yet. In 2020, he listed the farm for sale. Asking price $2.4 million for the land, equipment, and buildings. It sat on the market for 14 months. In 2021, it sold for $2.1 million. Russell moved into town, a small house in Mount Pleasant, 4 blocks from where Talbot Equipment used to be under the old ownership. He doesn't farm anymore. His son asked what he'd do with his time. He said he didn't know yet. Wayne Cordell still farms 580 acres. He's 66 now. He bought a Massey Ferguson 8S 265 in 2022, his 4th tractor from Prairie Red Equipment. He still keeps the list in a drawer in his office. 22 names. 17 of them are still farming or their sons are. 4 are retired. 1 sold out in 2021. Wayne doesn't talk about the list much. When people ask him about Talbot Equipment under the old ownership, he just says it was a dealership that forgot who kept them in business. He doesn't say it was a coordinated effort. He doesn't say 22 farmers made a decision together. He just says people got tired of being told they didn't maintain their equipment properly, and eventually they went somewhere else. Frank Colson retired from Prairie Red Equipment in 2023. At his retirement party, Wayne Cordell gave a short speech. He thanked Frank for running an honest service department, for filing warranty claims even when it was inconvenient, for treating 400-acre farms the same as 4,000-acre operations. He said those things mattered more than people realized. Frank said he'd just done his job. Wayne said that was the whole point. Russell Breckenridge doesn't drive much anymore. His blood pressure is controlled now, but his doctor still warns him about stress. But once every few months, he drives out to his old farm. The neighbor who bought it added more grain bins and repainted the machine shed. The fields look good, well maintained. The Massey Ferguson 8270 is still there, parked in the corner of the shed. The neighbor kept it, said it runs too well to scrap. Russell stands at the fence and looks at it for a while. He thinks about March 2007, about the transmission control module, about the service manager who wouldn't look at his records, about the $3,780 that cost him 320 acres. He wonders sometimes what would have happened if he'd argued harder, if he'd called corporate, if he'd joined Wayne Cordell's group and switched dealers when the others did. But he didn't. He paid the bill, kept farming, and carried the weight alone. The tractor is still running. The farm is gone. And the dealership that told him the damage was his fault lost 17 farms in 120 days and was eventually sold off. He gets back in his truck and drives home. He doesn't come out here as often as he used to, but some months he still does.